that an open chair there?
That's Jeff's.
Oh, somebody's there. Okay.
There is one over there.
There is an open one over there?
Yeah.
Maybe if there's an open chair near you, you could signal. We had 120 people here tonight. And I know that because my son counted your shoes.
And then divided by 2.
So we have it, yes.
Yeah.
You know that. So this is a good opportunity, since there are so many of you here, to try to get you to practice. Come on, people. This is the missing element. Yes, it is. This is a great philosophy. Not my philosophy, but the meditative philosophy. Great philosophy. Very nice ideas. Wonderful to read, to hear about. And that's a powerful thing, to read and hear about the Dharma. To have teachings that help you make sense of your own mind and your own experience and how to relate to it. That's a big thing. You could go through a whole lifetime and not have any way of approaching this situation that's at all reliable. So when people encounter a teaching like that, or like a meditative tradition, or the Buddha's teaching, or something like that, it can be amazing and eye-opening. Oh my! I'm reading the stuff about how minds work, right? And about my own nature, and about that alone is very powerful. Some of those concepts, like these basic concepts, like you have this capacity to be aware, and you can pay attention to your own experience and learn things. That you can notice that you're driven around by sensations all day long. And maybe you don't have to be moved this way and that by even little wiggly feelings inside of you, or some slight pleasant or unpleasant tinge. It's a big thing to encounter a teaching like that. Or to have a way of stabilizing your attention so that there's some stillness in this system. You're not just lost in the chaos of thinking. To even hear about that's a big deal. That can make you feel more stable just to hear, hey, maybe you're not the thoughts in your own head. Maybe you can be aware of the thoughts in your head. I remember in the early days of practicing, having conversations with people I knew like that, like, hey, that's a thought, what you just said? You could watch that? I was annoying. I don't do this all the time, I promise, but some of you probably do this to other people too. It's a disease, but early meditators' disease. But say, hey, you could watch your thoughts. Say, I can watch my thoughts? Yeah. Well, most people never thought about doing that before. That's radical. So it's a great concept. Oh, I can watch my thoughts. I don't have to believe every single one. Even just hearing that can change things. So the hearing of these teachings is a big deal too. The reading or the encountering. There's a lot of people remember the first time they encountered a teaching or heard about meditation. Sometimes just that hearing it shifts something. Like, oh, you mean this dis-ease that I'm feeling all the time, no matter what I do, even when I succeed, that dis-ease has a name. Right? In the Buddhist tradition, they call that dukkha. Mental unease. It comes from not seeing things as they are. and being constantly craving for something, constantly craving for some experience we're not having right now, constantly craving to become something that we don't think we are. Can any of you relate to that? Constantly craving to not be something that you think you are, to get rid of something. That dis-ease, which becomes, it's just like a flavor of experience all the time because we're so in that. To hear that that has a name, that can be radical and powerful. Say, oh wow, that's what's happening for me. And that's wonderful. What else? Well, there's so many things I could go through in that category. So hearing teachings is wonderful. Oh, you mean what's arising in my mind and body is conditioned? It's conditioned by a variety of things, and I'm not deciding what arises? You might not have known that. You mean I don't decide what thoughts I have? They're not my fault? It's not my fault I have this thought? Yeah, isn't that good news? If you haven't watched your mind, you might not know it's good news, but it is. That's radical just to hear that. Oh, the feelings that I have, those are conditioned. It's not like, hey, how come I have these sad feelings? I should just write other feelings, decide that I have other feelings and have them. Oh, you mean I don't get to decide what arises? But how I relate to what arises can completely change my experience of it? Well, that's a teaching. You could hear that and be like, wow, that can change your experience just to hear it. However, let's not just stop with hearing or with having a moment of awakening from just getting a glimpse or seeing a possibility. Let's see if we can actualize some of this understanding in our own mind stream. Let's see if we can take some of these concepts and allow them to become so integrated into our being that we don't have to think about them. That our response to life starts to be intuitive and intelligent as opposed to deluded. The way we respond to sensations in our body or other people's aggression or the thoughts in our head. To arrive at some experiential sanity. That's why I teach meditation. I teach it because one of the most powerful things about this path is that it's not just an incredible teaching. It's actually, there are methods for you. And there are many methods. There isn't one method of meditation. But there are methods available to you for actualizing what you read about. For realizing your nature, for realizing directly and experientially for yourself in a way that is irreversible. That your nature is the same as the nature of all the Buddhas of the past and the present and the future. Right? That when you read about people like the Buddha, that your nature is no different from that. To understand experientially what thoughts are and what is a sane relationship to this part of the mind so that you can use it but not be ruled by it. Experientially in your lived experience. So that requires something from you. Have you ever read a biography of somebody who did something amazing, and just because you read it and you're kind of in it, you're kind of like, oh, maybe I could do that. Just because you read about it. Or you ever watch some amazing athlete do something and it looks so easy, you're like, maybe I could do that. Or am I the only person deluded? The mind kind of does that sometimes. It's sort of like you see it, sort of think like, oh, maybe that's closer than it is. You know? It's like you don't understand, and you know that from the things that you've really trained in. You know, you understand what it actually takes to be able to. So what do I mean by practice for all of us? Well, one thing that really helps is to meditate daily. That's like a basic training, you know, and I'm not going to unpack all the instructions right here. I usually do that. I do that a lot, right? And you can read the basic instructions. But for you to sit every day for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes, for an hour, for longer than you want to. That's usually the response. For longer than you want to. That's a really good beginning. And to not just sit because it's good for you, like I did my 30 minutes. Yeah. But to sit with some intentionality. Not tension, but some intentionality, some interest, some desire to explore. Just like, you know, anything you do with no interest, you will not develop it. Right? Just think of any skill. You play music, athletics, school. Right? Anything you don't bring attention to. You can see people who do that for 30 years and there's no learning that happens or not much developing. So when you sit in a daily way, you bring some kind of interest to this process, like you're actually, I almost said doing something, but it is in a way, even though it's a non-doing. That can confuse people. They think, oh, it's non-doing. I did my 20 minutes. No, how about some interest? How about some spirit of inquiry? So that would be a great beginning for you to sit every day. That's why I started the intensive, which is like, at least you sign up for that and commit to it. Now, this is not to get you to do the intensive. You don't need to do the intensive to do that. You could just do it. Right? And I hope the people who do the intensive don't stop after 2 months. The idea is like, that's a great way to begin, or to keep it going. So to practice every day, and practice for longer than you like, which means you hit a little bit of a wall and it gets uncomfortable and you keep practicing. Because all day long you're hitting little walls and you're reacting. You're not bringing awareness and intentionality to the contact that's happening. And so that's a powerful thing, to practice sitting when it gets uncomfortable and to stay present with it. Oh, how do I relate to discomfort? Can I learn something in this territory? Can I learn to relax, to open, to stay here, to not go into freak out stories about it? So that you're training in something that's actually useful to you through your whole day. So sitting every day is a big deal. It's like a little laboratory where you get to investigate your own mind, your own experience. And you can do a lot in daily practice. Some people think, oh, daily practice, it really happens on retreat. Daily practice is kind of like whatever. No. With a real regular daily practice, and I know because I teach meditation, and occasionally people will actually practice every day, and I see what happens. They come and tell me about it. Occasionally, not that often. Occasionally. Once in a while, somebody will do that. Do you feel me needling you? So, you can, once you get a little concentrated, you can see what's going on in here. You can start to get a sense of what is shaping your world. And most people do not know. But you can explore this territory firsthand. That's the thing that turned me on to practice. You mean I can learn this for myself? Yes. Your whole world, your whole sense of the way things are and who you are is shaped by your mind, and you're not even interested? You have a method, you have the treasure of a method for investigating that, but you're on Instagram? Come on! I'll get to it later. That thinking is like, you won't get to it later. So having a daily practice is a big thing. But not just that. How about being interested through the day? Having a spirit of inquiry as you move through life. Interested in how you're actually living and what's actually happening in your mind as you move through the day and what you're actually reacting to and what patterns are actually moving you around and what thoughts are actually shaping your experience as you move through the day. How about that? How about when you're sitting alone, you don't just immediately pull out your phone, but you ask yourself questions like, what am I missing? Is anything missing? Could I add anything to what's here? Is there anything that's not already included in awareness here now? What feeling was I having right before I decided to reach for the phone? What thought is present in my mind telling me what I'm supposed to want or need? How about that? That's the spirit of inquiry, of looking, of investigation. And what a wonderful thing to have available to you. Once you start to practice daily and have a bit of stability, when you don't have any stability, it's very hard to inquire into your own mind. It's like anytime you ask a question, there's like 15 responses, and there's doubts about each one, and then there's amendments and footnotes to each of the doubts, and you just end up in a swirl of confusion, and then you think, that wasn't that fun. I wonder what's on Instagram. And that's because there's no stability. Without stability, inquiry is just confusing. It's just a lot of thinking and more thinking. So that's why cultivating this present moment attention, just moment by moment, sitting, walking, moving about, starts to be some stability in presence, in awareness, in wakefulness. That stability is experienced as some stillness, some settledness, even when there are storms. So there's storms and some presence. When there's some little bit of that stability, there doesn't have to be a ton, a little bit, then you can start to investigate. Oh. I have felt terrible. What thought was present? Oh. When did that feeling go away? And now what thought is present? Oh. You can explore that not just in retrospect, but also in retrospect. So that's why the formal practice is so important. But not only that, also being present in just what you're doing. That's how stability happens. Should we make a bumper sticker? Stability happens. Hashtag stability happens. But just like shit doesn't just happen. There's some causes and conditions there. And stability doesn't just happen, although it does happen occasionally. Who knows why? But how about us deciding to live here with presence as a ground? How about being interested in that, or realizing that, even having the idea that maybe that's possible. See, the great news about your life is that it's already happening. So this isn't actually adding on some other task that you have to fit in. Actually, the formal meditation, that is. That's actually, you're actually not adding something on, you're taking something away. So it involves some renunciation. You know, renunciation is like a dirty word in our society. But in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about the joy of renunciation. That's the joy people feel the first moment that they delete their social media accounts before they feel all empty and hollow inside. And instead of reaching for the vehicle of the Dharma, they sign back up. But the joy of renunciation is making that kind of space. Making a little space. It's taking away the unimportant, the extra, it's actually not unimportant and extra. It's removing the stuff that actually you don't even like. Like, let's be honest about it. It's the stuff you don't even like, but you keep doing habitually and you think you need it. Don't remove the things like, I won't go for a walk today because, I'll meditate instead. No, go for your walk. There's a few other things you could remove. Right? I mean, right? Okay. So, and that starts to be a joy because you're actually putting something, it's not like, sometimes in this, especially in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, there's this kind of weird attitude of like, I'll just optimize everything. I'll keep adding stuff. So I add meditation, and it'll just make everything else I do supercharged. I won't have any downtime. No. I get those kinds of questions sometimes. How can I, if I meditate an hour a day, can I sleep less? Aren't there some other things besides sleep you could maybe reduce? So, is it possible to meditate enough that I don't need to sleep? Somebody asked me that. So making space to practice an hour a day or 45 minutes a day in a formal way, that does require some, you have to give something up. Yeah? And I recommend it. But the rest of being present, it may or may not require, in the beginning it doesn't require you to give anything up. But as you become more present, there are things that you will want to give up. There are things that will fall away. They will fall away because you won't need them the way you think you need them now. Even stuff like some of the constant stimulation that people just go to because as soon as they feel unstimulated, they feel empty. When that stimulation starts to feel actually like an imposition, then you don't actually have to renounce stuff. It's like, why would I want to add that to this? It's like not adding anything. Right? So things will fall away, but the beauty is you're already living your life, so why not be here for it? And it's not actually a question of time. It's a question of intention. It's a question of, as my wife and I have had a particular teacher in common, and she was telling me something that teacher Rena had said about you have to decide. It's about deciding, not about time. And there's something to that. And that happens for people. This starts to become primary because you realize this is here anyway. I'm already here. Why not be here? Does it mean that what's here is easy? No, it doesn't. This isn't like, oh, be here, and then just, you'd be in bliss all the time. No. When you're here, you have the territory then of practice, which is the territory of your human life. And now there may be a little more of the bliss of non-attachment, which may not feel like what you think it will feel like. Some kind of like bliss beaming at you, like, yeah! You know, there's like bliss, sign me up for that. But just the ease of non-grasping is a kind of bliss. The bliss of non-harming. The bliss of not having to look over your shoulder because you're living in an ethical way, in a basically ethical way. They call that, in the tradition, they call it the bliss of blamelessness. That doesn't mean everybody likes you. Other people don't even notice. So they're still mad at you and upset at you, you still offended them. But you know that at least on some, that's a kind of a ease in itself. Not like want to rise at that totally necessarily, but that starts to become a little bit more than ease as you live. The bliss of non-craving. The bliss of just being. And again, that word I hesitate to use because it throws people off. They think, I'm not in bliss. It's not like the removal of an agitation. How do you describe the absence of something? How do you decide? It's like when I remember a couple of weeks ago I had to cancel because my tooth was, what does Kramer say? Exploded. Didn't quite explode, but, having a toothache is really intense pain. It kind of really vivifies a very small area, right? And kind of can narrow awareness a little bit. And how about when the pain is gone, the expanding? So I'm using a gross level metaphor because that is actually something that happens not when the pain goes away, but when craving and clinging go away. Even, or reduced even in a few moments, there's a sign of an easing that is analogous to the easing of actual pain. Hard to describe. Yeah? And you may not even feel it as a thing, but over time you will start to feel that. So, what am I saying? I'm saying there's something worthy here. Not just here in this meditative practice, but there's something worthy in you. You are worthy of some attending to. And I mean you. I know I say that you to a group of people, and 98% of them are like, everybody else. You don't know me. But I know enough. Okay? You are worthy. Your nature is not different than the nature of the Buddha. You are worth this attending. And not everybody got this kind of attending in our early life or ever from anybody necessarily. But how about now? How about the idea that maybe this is worthwhile, that maybe you are worthwhile? And that becomes a gift to everybody. Because you're a being. Sometimes everybody wants to save other beings. People love that. And Buddhism, let's liberate other beings. So like, how are you doing? So like, other beings. You can do both. But if you neglect this, you're saving other beings. It's going to be pretty flawed. And it will burn out. You will burn out, and it will be reactive and limited. So this is not either or. I do hope that you don't limit this to just that, but actually that would be a worthy thing. Just this too, and our work in the world. Let's have it be both. But sometimes I noticed that even my activist community, it's always this domain. You know, the great people everybody's admiring, they often attended to this territory. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, right? This is attending to what's here, in a way that people admire, right? Reflecting, paying attention, prioritizing. So, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's I'll just say one other piece. This thing of like when people just say my meditation and they just mean they're sitting, I want you to definitely sit, but don't leave it there, please. That's a big mistake. So, you get the message. So now we can dialogue a little bit if you'd like to. I'm interested in your practicing, your questions. As I said last week, sometimes you have questions you think you know the answer to, but it really helps sometimes to say it out loud or to ask it anyway. Also, if you want to share anything about what makes it hard to practice, that also sometimes nice, good to hear. I'm not going to solve that problem for you. So I don't like who said, like, what about this? It's your job. I'm not going to micromanage that for you. You figure it out. But sometimes it's also useful to say it out loud. Oh, I notice this gets in the way for me, and then we'll just like let it sit in the air. Okay, that gets in the way. Sometimes just hearing yourself say it, you realize, okay, that's what I'm letting get in the way. That's the thing in my way. Yeah, please.
Hey,
Hey.
Nice to see you. I've been away for a few months,
It's
but
nice to see you too.
yeah, it's great seeing you again. So I had a muscle injury a few years ago, and one of the effects of that I noticed when I was doing my sitting. The injury created this muscle tension, and I kind of forgot how to relax, how to be able to relax that muscle.
Yeah.
It's this muscle amnesia thing.
So you had an injury that a muscle got tense and you forgot how to somatically access that area.
Yeah, it's a muscle amnesia thing.
Yeah.
And then I
Muscle
found.
amnesia? Is that,
Yeah,
I've never heard that.
yeah. It's a kind
Good to have
of
the
some
term.
Feldenkrais thing. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, I found during my sitting meditation, it often I would make it worse, and this is a voluntary muscle, obviously,
Yeah.
because I would just be very aware of it,
Mhm.
and then because I had this amnesia thing where I kind of forgot how to relax it,
Yeah.
I would keep paying attention to it, and then it would just be getting worse and worse, right? Because to relax,
Yeah. So let me just repeat what you said, just so that everybody, just this part so far. So you have this muscle that's kind of habitually tense. And you notice when you sit, it draws your attention. You pay
Yes.
attention to it because it's probably uncomfortable, and then it gets more and more tight.
yeah, and so I went through all these stages of like, okay, I can't focus on it, but of course, if something's like taboo, you're going to just focus on it, and so it really impacted my sitting, and I stopped for a while,
Mhm.
and then I actually shifted to doing it later in the day. But I guess I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about that. And I sort of noticed there's also a difference between, not just the muscle tension, but like a feeling or something when there's a difference between sort of, I guess, observing it and letting it be versus like noticing it to the extent that you're feeding it almost.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So it's a subtle but noticeable
Yeah.
difference between just being aware of something and kind of feeding it energy.
Yes.
Yeah, or energy, but feeding it in a way, and it kind of gets,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I feel I would love to reclaim, I'm still sitting, but it's
Yeah,
modified and
no,
reduced, but I'd like to reclaim that.
I'll say a few things, and so, some of you are thinking, I don't have a muscle tension, so this isn't my issue. But actually, it's actually very important. It relates to any kind of uncomfortable experience, whether it's an emotional experience or some kind of energetic knot in your body. This topic applies. So I'll just say a few things that you can try, and you can just play around with it. So one of the things you've noticed is that when you pay attention to things, sometimes you're feeding that energy. Yeah. And so that's actually something that's good to know. It's good to know that, just like focusing on pain can be very concentrating, but can also be tiring. So sometimes actually making a more spacious awareness, learning how and practicing not focusing on. So maybe you focus on the whole body. Or what can be even more helpful sometimes is let sounds be your primary domain of attending. So rather than the breath, sounds. And that's really, you can just open the windows and listen to the city or whatever. Because usually hearing is spacious, and also it's not something you can anticipate. So it's not like you can feed it sounds much. It's like, okay, it's that receptive awareness. And then you can let the body appear within that receptivity. So sometimes we have habits, like it's a habit for the body to have disconnected from that area with attention in a way. Yeah. It doesn't know how to access it. And our attention can have habits in it too. So sometimes there's a kind of what's the word? Like a doing energy that comes with the attention.
Yeah.
It's not just observing.
Right.
It's that kind of like agenda. But it may just be like unconscious.
Yeah.
So sometimes making a really spacious environment like that with hearing, and then having things appear in it, allows your system to retune to the receptive as opposed to the active. So you want to do that with like energetic knots. You don't want to like focus on them, because that just feeds energy into them. And it's like, it's analogous to like when you're feeling really tense about something and I say, relax, or hey, come on, relax, stop. And you always get more tense, right? Or somebody says like, I'm really worried about this thing. Like, don't worry about that. That never helps you, right? Because when worry gets met with like an imperative, its job is to worry, so it tightens. Yeah. So the job of tight things is to be tight. So they're doing their job. So if you're trying to loosen it, that often has this kind of backfire. So that's one thing I would try, that kind of spaciousness, and letting it happen within it, without an agenda to like get awareness back into that part of the body. That's a key part. You can do other things to do that, not in your meditation, like roll around and do Tai Chi or whatever, movement stuff that helps the nervous system, and tapping, those kinds of things. That's an area I'm interested in, but not my expertise. And then let the meditation be this much more like open, spacious. But the hearing is a great way to get back to receptivity. I would experiment with that. Also, if you're having a lot of pain, I don't know if it's any less tense if you're laying down.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So you could also just lay down and practice. But the important thing is to not stop.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times attention just brings all of the unconscious agendas. So it's paradoxical. Then you think, well, I can't meditate because I don't want to pay attention to it. So you want to trick your mind by doing a different kind of attending. Attending that you can't bring agendas to. It's very hard to bring an agenda to hearing. I mean, you can, kind of, but especially if you're not hearing music that has a predictable rhythm, or if you're hearing sounds, you have to be receptive because you don't know what's going to arise. So I would play with that, but then let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have to find ways of working with different things that are happening. And I've fed a lot of energy to like knots in my body, and just suffered.
Yeah.
Because it's like, there's this closed thing. You're feeding energy into it. It just hurts. And And like I said, closed things, this sounds a little anthropomorphized, but it's kind of like that. Closed things are closing because for some reason. And trying to open them often makes them close more. Whereas if you let them be closed, often then they can relax. Like you say to somebody, I'm so tense, and they say, yeah, I'm here with you, I understand why you're tense. It's like, oh, thanks. Right, doesn't that happen interpersonally? Like, God, I'm so worried about that. I get that, I understand why you're worried. People are like, relax a little. Doesn't mean they stop worrying. But the psyche is like that too. It's that kind of acknowledgement, that needing, that welcoming, like I'm always saying. Does that sound?
Yeah. I'll try that.
Yeah, try it, and then let me know. Yeah, Evelyn.
This is somewhat related. Today I had an experience where some news brought on a sense of anxiety, and I noticed that thoughts I were having before the news now had a different flavor to them.
Yeah.
Where they felt connected to the anxiety, which before they did not. The same thoughts.
Yeah, so you had some news come to you, and you were having similar thoughts after the news as before, but they had a very different quality in your experience.
And they now felt like they were adding on to the anxiety even.
Sure.
But then I also was feeling somewhat nauseous. I noticed that, and I couldn't tell if that was also connected to the anxiety or just another factor.
Yeah.
And it feels useful to know if, like, my body is trying to tell me something, or that
I see, yeah.
my thoughts are causing the body pain.
So you're feeling nauseous, but you're not sure if it's related, but it feels like if it is, maybe that's some kind of information might be good to know.
So I'm just curious about an inquiry in order to kind of parse that out.
Yeah. So how does inquiry help us parse that out? Inquiry is this funny thing where we want to be interested, but not do a kind of like but not need to know. Right? So there's a lot of times what's happening in your body, you might have a realization like, oh, this fear is related to this event. You know, or, oh, this thought always gives rise to this feeling. And sometimes you don't know. You say, I'm feeling nauseous, but I don't know if that's related or not. You don't need to use inquiry to like figure it out.
Okay.
Sometimes that just gets busy. You know? If you ask the question and it becomes clear, fine. So like, yeah. But otherwise, you know, a lot of times you don't know. And the nice thing about practice is you don't need to. This is not a path where you need to understand why. It's actually much more about what than about why. What is happening? It's what and how, maybe. What is happening? How am I being with it? Yeah. How is this relating to what everything else that's happening in this moment, right? Like, okay, there's this nausea, and now I'm having a thought about it, like, whatever that is. Can you notice that in real time? But I think the why questions, sometimes they're useful because you say, and the answer is right there, but sometimes they can just lead you down a rabbit hole of thinking that actually takes you out of the present. So I would just say that, you know, and sometimes people do that. They discover stuff inside themselves, and naturally sometimes you want to know why. Why do I have that thought? You know, where does that come from, or why did I? And you can go think about that, and that could be useful. Sometimes you ask that question, why, and you just realize, oh, you remember something from the past or whatever. But sometimes not. So it's important that you make room for both, you know, because you can make connections about your life meditating. It'd be like, you know, I don't divide those territories of like therapy and practice because it's the same mind. Yeah. But it's kind of like that territory. It's like you realize how things are connected in your life. That can be fine. But if you have an agenda, it can get frustrating. There's a lot of stuff you don't know in the present. I would, yeah. And that's wonderful to have something that you can leave like that. Not need to know why. Yeah, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, so something that I'm working on is, the judging mind.
The judging mind.
Yeah.
I'm sure nobody else knows anything about that.
And I think it particularly manages itself in work.
suggesting in work?
in work,
Yeah.
right? Particularly if you're in a position where that's one of the things you're supposed to do. And,
Yeah, you're part of your work involves judging.
well, right, you're the boss, one of the bosses or whatever.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
evaluating.
Yeah, and so it's, and one of those things where I maybe know the answer, but I just like to hear,
Totally.
which is sort of judging versus assessing maybe?
Yeah.
Or, but it's something, it's judging myself, but also other people and trying not to do that. So if you could just kind of,
Yeah, that's an important question, this judging versus assessing. Yeah. And we are assessors. And actually, the more clearly we are seeing, the more reliably we can discern things. That's kind of important. So sometimes people hear like, oh, non-judgmental, and then they get worried. They're like, am I gonna just walk around and not know what's going on? And not be able to assess like who's dangerous or who I should hire, or who actually no, the more we are in touch with what's actually present, the more reliable data we have. I think that when we talk about judging, often I wish we had another word for it. Maybe we could call it, I don't know what we call it. I'll try to think of something. Criticizing, yeah. But it's almost like the kind of judging you're describing is different than that. Right? It's not just like, oh, I said this thing. This is the way assessing would be. I said it this way. I could have said it this way. That's not what we mean by judging. Right? Judging is like, I said it this way. I'm an idiot. How could I have done that? How am I even in my role? Or this person says something, and rather than you seeing, you might say like, it's important, you're in charge, you're responsible. You have to assess the people working there. Maybe they're not reliable or safe. That's important that you're assessing. And it's important that you're watching your mind, that you're not pigeonholing people with a certain kind of judgment, which is like that kind of blunt force object that we lacerate ourselves with. And so I think of that as very different, sort of like, and the way to get to know the difference is to watch the mind more closely. And it's actually to let yourself judge people, but be interested in that. So rather than what most people are doing is like, I should try not to judge people. I'll just pretend I'm not. Rather than that, say like, I'm gonna go judge like a maniac and see what my mind is saying. Go sit and watch people walk by in Berkeley and just like, there could be ample opportunity. You don't even know them, right? It's just like, oh, this person is like this person's like this. And so you say, okay, or watch the stories you make up about people in your life. And just to start to notice, oh, that's a narrative. So you can see it's limited. It may have some truth in it. But you can also then see how it collapses a greater thing into something narrow. Like when you peg people. Right? And that's important not to do because, and that's why sometimes at work it's nice to have a time where you ask people questions like, it's nice to do this in companies or whatever. So like, tell us 10 things people might not know about you. And then all of a sudden you hear a little bit of the stuff that doesn't come out at work. And your heart just opens. Why? Because you realize these are full human beings, even if they annoy you sometimes. So I just think the only way to tell that difference is just to really watch your mind. And it's important not to castigate yourself for judging in that way you're describing, because the mind will judge like that. Our job is to not let that shape experience. But the only way it comes to not shape experience is for us to see how conditioned it is and how unreliable. Because we learn best from reality. So if you are following sometimes this happened for me at a certain phase where I had my roots of going places, and then I tried Google Maps. It's like, that's a very roundabout way I'm going to that place.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, but I like that route, you know, so I never go that route anymore. I always go the direct route. Because actually I didn't know the direct route. Now, once you go deeper into Google Maps, you realize it doesn't always know the direct route. So now my faith has been exploded in Google Maps. Sometimes I go left when it says go right, and then like 5 minutes fall off it. So it's like, oh. So now it's really different. So sorry Google. You don't know everything. But I think that process of just watching the mind is so valuable. Because even after you practice, you will still notice your mind habitually saying things. It's the degree to which you are believing it that it has power. The degree to which it scares you that it's there is the amount of power it has. That's true of all thoughts. So when those thoughts don't scare you, and you know they're just habitual programming, that's when they stop arising as much. But it's only after you really don't care about them. And everybody wants to get rid of them before that stage. And to bring us all the way back to my original theme, that's why we have to practice. Because just hearing that is not enough. We have to know it for ourselves. And to be free internally from the belief in those habitual stories you have about you, who you are and who you're not, like, that freedom is so worthwhile. Even a little bit of that. You know? You are not what your mind is telling you you are. And I can say that with 100% confidence to all of you. I can't say that about almost anything. I can't say almost anything with 100% confidence. But that I can say. So let's find out for ourselves. So that can liberate us. Okay, so I think that's a good place to close for tonight. Jeff, do we still need more volunteers for setup stuff?
No, I'd like to thank the people that came up to me. We are full, we're good. We have Daniel, Nani, and Lehan, raise your hand. I saw you earlier.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then, of course, Kramer, but I'd like to thank them for volunteering.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, and Charlotte. Charlotte, sorry, you
And
are.
Charlotte.
Where's Charlotte?
Awesome. Thank you.
Charlotte, raise your hand.
She just left.
Yeah.
Nope, she's still there.
She's here.
Sorry, Charlotte, you've been with us a little longer. Sorry.
So let's just sit for a moment. We'll formally close. So if you have time to help us stay and put things away, thank you for that. And if you ever want to come early and help set up, that's always wonderful too. And we have our donation basket in the back, and I also thank you for your support in that form as well. So may each one of us, in our own way, continue to investigate reality and to look deeply into our own experience, into our own heart and mind. And may we be willing to see things as they are, and to meet things as they are. And may this clear seeing, this clear knowing, free us. And may this be for the benefit of all beings, everywhere. Okay, thank you. See you soon.
Charlotte, I'm sorry I forgot.
Take your nature with you.